If you're dealing with a high conflict situation, we understand how challenging and overwhelming it can be. That's why we've created a free resource for you to help you begin managing the high conflict dynamic. Our high conflict diversion program booklet, When Co-Parenting Doesn't Work, provides great information and innovative strategies to help you disengage from the conflict and prioritize your child's best interests. To access this valuable resource, simply visit highconflict.net/booklet and download your free copy of When Co-Parenting Doesn't Work. We believe that every parent deserves the support and guidance they need to navigate high conflict divorce and custody battles. And we're here to help you every step of the way. So be sure to visit highconflict.net/booklet to receive your booklet today. And thank you for tuning in to the High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast. We look forward to supporting you on your journey. Welcome back, everybody, to the High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast with Brooke Olson. My special guest this week is Rich Carr. He is the author of Surprised, The Science and Art of Engagement, and also Brain-Centric Design, a surprising neuroscience behind learning with deep understanding. Thanks for joining me here this week, Rich.
Absolutely my pleasure, Book. I'm very excited to be here.
So what kind of sparked my interest in having you as a guest was your book, Surprised, and this notion of how surprise or that piece that comes in that kind of imprints with us and creates memory and things that get held in here. And I know that from a lot of the work that I do with my clients, there's this history of trauma that has the other side of that imprinting, but there's a positive side to this piece that you talk about as well. And that is, at creating that memory bank of events and imprints that bring us joy. And I wanted to step in here and just kind of ask you how you came to all of this.
Well, it's a great question because it wasn't intentional at all, as a lot of things aren't. It was not intentional. No, I had grew up in the 80s. I was out of high school. I went right into broadcast radio, when we actually played records, LPs, that kind of radio, and did really well in it on air. I ended up owning a couple small market stations, and I was really involved with sales. And I loved the sales process because when I was taught sales, I was not taught to sell anybody. I was taught to bring a solution to somebody for a problem that they had. And in radio, it was usually helping a retail space sell more of something. So because we dealt with radio and only with sound, I got real interested in how we processed what other people said. That was putting my toe into the water. And then I started listening to things like Wayne Dwyer's Psychology of Success. I got into NLP, and I was reading all these things about the mind. And at that time, this is the 80s, things were not as documented as they were today at all. And as time went on, this was in the era of Trump's first book, Ronald Reagan, Gordon Gekko, things like that. So my original desire was to create the ultimate sales pitch to where no matter what, people would say yes, because all I had to do was figure out how that would work in the mind. That led to some more serious study. My my degrees are in mass communication and psychology. I went into the military, worked in communications, came out, and then I started getting involved in neuroscience and cognitive neuroscience, and finally the learning sciences in cognitive neuroscience. So the brain, but only the part of the brain where new information was lodged as long-term memory. And in that journey, I met a cognitive neuroscientist from the University of Washington named Dr. Kiran Omani. And he had been studying this for about 40 years for academia. But it was going nowhere in academia because it's a big, 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 big machine, like big pharma. And at the time, I had just had this rather substantial accident in my life, had plenty of time. We got to know each other. And then I started getting very, very heavy into it. And fortunately for me, this was about the same time as one of my former bosses, Paul Allen from Microsoft. I was his director of digital in Portland for his media stations. And I had access to incredible thinkers and incredible resources and really kind of buckled down on the brain, not as 3 pounds of goop, but as a toolbox. And even though all these toolboxes have Latin names and funky things and how they were originally named in the brain, and we could point to them, but we didn't know what they would do, it was a relatively simple breadcrumb trail that Kieran illuminated in his research. And that's when we wrote that book, Brain-Centric Design, which is a neurogogic model. It's literally how the brain processes information and how people love to learn. And by learn, that word, I have to expand a little bit because it really means how people take on new information and understand it, not memory. Memory's flawed. That's different than understanding. And in that particular science, it occurred to me about several years after we wrote the book that every step in that science was in reality a surprise. Everybody took it as a surprise. So Surprised was written, the science of an art of engagement was written to show how to manage a series of surprises to get the desired reaction from your audience, whether that was an audience of many or an audience of one, and even in this case, an audience that's conflicted. And how do you get them out of that red state of mind into a more green state of mind, or at minimum, not so red? So those things were wonderful because it was controlling a situation, typically with words or actions or multiple perspectives on a given point, if you knew what the point was. And the point being the big idea, what you're talking about. Like if you and I are having a conversation, I would come into it with a big idea, meaning at the end of this, what are you going to walk away with understanding? And my hopes in this conversation is the fact that surprise is that one thing that we can control that can take somebody from a red emotion or situation into a green emotion or situation, depending on how that surprise is handled. Because there's surprise, a lot of people think it's just a thing, like boo or happy birthday. But it's not. There's 5 primary forms of surprise, and then there's dozens and dozens and dozens of particular surprises, and they all have a slightly different effect on the human brain and how we react to them. So you can talk to one person and they'll say they hate surprise birthday parties, or they hate being surprised in the scary sense, in the Scooby-Doo sense, but they love these foreshadowed surprises or pleasant surprises or cognitive surprises, things that they didn't really know were a surprise, but they are listed under surprise. Kind of a long soliloquy to get to the point that this one emotion out of your 8 main emotions is just an amazing, powerful lever for getting people to think differently and engaging in whatever it is you're saying.
Yeah, I think about, as you're talking, Rich, when people come together in a high conflict situation that we're kind of discussing here today a little bit, there is a expectation of conflict within the relationship. There's an expectation of when I talk to, how I talk to, they're going to show up in a conflicted manner, or I'm going to show up in a conflicted manner. That's the expectation in the complex. And when, to your point, we show up in a different way, where we're not coming at it from conflict, where we're coming at it from neutrality, or we're coming at it from a place of trying to solve a problem, we throw the system off balance. It starts to create a warble within it. And that warble is an opening to a different way of dealing with the complex. Is this a little bit about what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's I would call that warble or wobble disequilibrium,
Mhm.
uh, because that's what surprise is. It is the unexpected. And the unexpected, if managed, especially the first thing that follows the unexpected, which is called the recovery period. You get that surprise, however it's delivered, and then you have full attention. You have the brain's full attention because that brain is two primary purposes in your life, and one is to keep you alive. That's the stuff that you're primarily not. With eating right, exercise, sleep, all that other stuff, you're kind of in control of. But your body temperature, heartbeat regulation, breathing, all that stuff is handled by that part of the brain. And then the rest of the brain, uh, aside from the animal brain, is to help you thrive. And when you are faced with the unexpected, your whole body pays attention for, from a millisecond to longer to see if this is something that's going to hurt me or something that's going to help me. So you're in a point of non-judgment, so to speak. You're at a decision point, and that's why using surprises, like even in my own case, with your primarily case of study here. In my own case, I've been in hostile conflict, divorce situation, and I had used the surprise of third person from the moment things were filed. I was no longer I was Rich. And times were no longer we'll meet here. Rich will pick up the kids at type of situations. And that became kind of fun because and fun, not in jovial, but in a relaxing way where, okay, this divorce is happening. Uh, I was the one that filed. And I'm going to consider it done now. There are details that have to happen with the law and meetings and the handoff of the kids and things of that nature. But I wanted to create what I would call an emotional distance uh, from both parties to reduce any kind of trigger that would be of conflict because we were in, I think it was a buddy of mine named Don. He says, I said, oh, I don't want to cause any rifts. He goes, what do you mean? You're at war. The way he said it. And it was like, okay, well, then I hearkened back to military. And in the military, we reframe a lot of stuff in the situation that you're in. You could look at it one way and go, oh, Hollywood, or you could look at it another way and say, I have an objective. And if some of those emotions were removed, they worked really well. And in that third person method that I spoke of, it was beautiful because now I was somebody managing Rich's affairs versus being in the middle of it and dealing with the emotions that will fuel conflict. Because aside from the surprise, you have joy, which is where we want to be. That would be where I'd call it green emotion. And there's dozens of emotions that spur off of joy. But what I wanted to avoid was.
Hi there. We hope you're loving this episode and finding it super helpful. We wanted to let you know that the rest of this episode is exclusively available to members of the Disengagement Zone. But don't worry, you can join right now and get your first month completely free. That means you'll have access to all of our exclusive episodes, tools, and resources at no cost for the entire month. Just click on the link in the description to sign up today. Take this opportunity to dive deeper and get the support you need. We'd love to welcome you to the Disengagement Zone.